Yes. So again, welcome to the Rebound Live Leadership Webcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host, former basketball coach and player at the University of North Carolina, author of the book Rebound. So we'll talk about the 6 no's of leadership, starting out with the self. And I have to have acronyms. I have to make up stories for me to remember it and my players. So I make up a story about recruiting a player named Stevitt. Stevitt was from Eastern Europe, and his name spelled S-T-E-V-I-T. And again, these are leadership lessons, concepts that everybody should be aware of and learn. Because if you're not a leader at your organization, again, you're a leader in your peer group, you're a leader at home, you're a leader in your community. So Stevitt, the S stands for self, know yourself. And then the T is know your team. E is know your environment. V is know your vision. I is know the industry. And lastly, the T in Stevitt is, to me, maybe the most important, is mind for the truth. And we'll get into these other topics, other 6, the other 5 no's, but I really want to focus on the self, because if you don't know yourself, you can't lead others. After I lost my job at North Carolina in 2003, I went on a leadership journey. I worked with an executive coach at the University of Virginia, Carol Weber. And the first thing she did was have me fill out a Myers-Briggs assessment. So some of you probably are aware of Myers-Briggs. There's different assessments. The DISC is a popular assessment. I'm trained to do DISC, but any of those assessments I think are good is to help you become aware of what you're good at and areas of opportunity. They call them areas of opportunity, but it's basically areas that you're not very good at. A friend of mine says, we want to work on areas we are weak in, and that we shouldn't spend so much time working in those areas. We should really focus on what we're good at. And as a former basketball player and a frustrated golfer, I always want to work on the things I'm not good at, like chipping and putting. And now I think about it, tee shots and fairway irons. I'm not a very good golfer, but the point being is, if you know yourself, you know what you like, you know what you're good at, you know what gives you energy, and you know what sucks the life out of you. And when you're a leader, fortunately, you can hire people that augment your skill set. And you also can avoid putting yourself in positions that are frustrating. So to know yourself. So I went on this leadership journey, got to UVA, and Carol Weber, after some small talk, and I went in there in 2003 after I lost my job thinking, I wasn't a good leader, because I was told I wasn't a good leader. It was written in the papers. The media said I wasn't a good leader. So I went into her, and she said, after some small talk, she said, you're an ENTJ. And I said, I've been called a lot of 4-letter words before, but ENTJ wasn't one of them. And she explained to me what an ENTJ was in the Myers-Briggs assessment model. And she said only 2% of the population are ENTJs. And I thought immediately that I must be elite, that North Carolina just fired an elite coach, and realized quickly when she says, no, you don't get it, that means that 98% of the population doesn't think like you think. And that's when I hit myself in the head and had an aha moment saying, oh my God. I would get frustrated at people, players, staff, when they didn't see things the way I saw it. And immediately had the aha moment. And I thought, why didn't I get this assessment done before I became a head coach? I might have been more patient with my players, my staff, and the people around me. So I think that the first step is we really need to know ourselves. And a friend of mine said, a couple friends, don't work on your weaknesses. Don't try to become great at something that you're probably never going to be great at, and it's just going to frustrate you and tire you, suck the energy out of you. Put yourselves in position of things that you really like to do. Now, we're not all in that position, especially if you're working for somebody else, but it's their job to put you in position to be successful. I have a client, I'm an executive coach. I have a client frustrated with someone on their staff, and they got promoted. I said, well, why did you promote them? And they said, well, I promoted them because someone quit. And so they promoted the next person in line because that person had been there and they're good at what they do, but now they had to manage people. And I said, well, that's like taking Michael Jordan off the floor and having him coach the team half the game. He wants to be out on the court doing what he does best. And now we shouldn't get mad at that person. We should be mad at ourselves for not knowing to put that person in the position where they can be successful. So what issues, what leadership issues, what in pertaining to knowing yourself, or who has done an assessment, and what did you learn about yourself? If you don't mind raising your hands. And again, if you all, some of you might be in the car listening, so that I understand you're not going on video, but I'd love to see your faces. And if you could raise your hand, that would be great. If you have a thought of what keeps you up at night as a leader, and what maybe aha moment did you have, and how did you learn about self? I know David's in the crowd. I know David Forrest very well. David has great experience, and I'm going to pick on David.
Okay.
David,
yes, sir.
Tell people a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Because I met David at a family event, a gathering, and we talked leadership for probably 2 hours straight. So David, tell a little bit about your background, please.
Sure, Matt. Thanks very much. Appreciate the invitation to participate today. I have a unique background. I went to school for molecular biology and ended up being an animal trainer. So you talk about a disconnect. There was one right there. You start down one pathway and end up so far away. But to make a long story short, I worked for SeaWorld for 38 years. I was an animal trainer and had the wonderful experience of learning the concept of behavior, and realize everything in this world is about behavior. Everything you do is behavior. How you are evaluated is your behavior. People use the term personality, but in essence, that defines your behavior. And in essence, what I learned is there's only 4 things in life that you control: what you say, what you don't say, what you do, and what you don't do. And that's it. Everything else you influence. So when I meet you for the first time, if I shake your hand firmly and look you in the eye, you might have a better judgment of me. So I influence your opinion of me, but it was based upon totally what I control. My handshake and my look at you, versus just gazing away and giving you perhaps a limp handshake, in which case you have a negative perception of me. So throughout my career, I learned to observe behavior and then adjust my behavior accordingly. And when I've done management seminars, I do it based on behavior, because true managers aren't managing staff, they're managing their own behavior. If you're trying to influence one of your staff members to get something accomplished, in some cases, and I'll use parallels to coaching because it obviously makes perfect sense. You know, a good coach recognizes that in some case you pat them on the back, another case you kick them in the butt, another case you yell at them, another case you listen to them. So the greatest coaches are the ones that know how to push the buttons for the individual players. And the greatest manager does the exact same thing. They evaluate, they look, they see, they pull their eyeballs out of their head and look at themselves, because that's what your staff/animals see when they're interacting with you. So throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to observe myself. People would ask me, like, do you train your kids? No, I didn't train my kids. I trained myself how to interact with my 2 kids who have 2 different attitudes and personalities towards life. And so I had to interact with them different to get the same outcomes from both of them. there's a word that people use too often is consistency. And consistency and predictability are two different words, and oftentimes people get confused and it's a problem. Consistency is the same thing on a regular basis. Predictability is the anticipation of the same thing. Let me use a simple example. Consistency is on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, you turn the TV on to watch your favorite television show. Back in the day, being that we're all kind of older, I can use this example. Friends was one of my favorite shows. So
I thought you were going to go like to Andy Griffith or MASH or something. So yeah, Friends. I think we all watched Friends at one time.
Actually, Matt, I was going to go back to Howdy Doody, but I figured that might be too far.
So. You would have lost most of the crowd. I think you would have been alone. You would have been alone on that one.
I know. I had a guess on this one. So Thursday night, 8 o'clock, turn the television on, Friends, and I love it. That's consistency. Thursday night, 8 o'clock, turn on Friends. If it's the exact same episode every week, that's predictability. And predictability leads to boredom. Boredom leads to frustration. Frustration leads to aggression. So
David, please repeat what you just said. I thought it was awesome. Consistency.
Consistency versus predictability. Predictability, if you're always predictable, if people know exactly what you're going to do over and over and over again, predictability leads to boredom. Boredom leads to frustration. Frustration leads to aggression.
Well, how many, raise your hand if you've been in that setting where the predictability, and that used to drive me crazy. Whereas the same thing every day, and I get bored quick, and so as a leader, David, how would you structure a meeting, or how would you structure, your week so that there's consistency, but not as much predictability, so it keeps things interesting for not only your team, but your animals?
Right. Well, there's a good example. Here's one that I used when I first became an officer at SeaWorld. I was brought in, just a quick story. When I was promoted to a vice president, the general manager brings me in the office, and in a matter of a moment, she tells me that I'm a vice president. And I said, okay, but I have a problem with this that you might have. I just want to let you know about it. I said, I am not your typical administrator. My dad used to tell me I'm one bubble off plum. I look at life a little differently on things. She says, I'm not sure what you mean. I said, well, when I've attended your meetings, when I've had to sit in for my former boss that got promoted to corporate, so now I'm sliding in his chair, everybody sits in the exact same seat every single week. And she says, I noticed when you come, you sit, there was the big round table where the vice presidents would sit, and then the outside perimeter of the room would be the directors. And she says, well, I noticed when you come and you're sitting in for that you're always sitting on the perimeter. I say, I'm a perimeter person. She says, why don't you sit at the table? I said, can you not hear me?
Right.
When I'm sitting in the outside chairs, in the director's chairs? I said, the point is this, everybody sits in the exact same seat. You go through the exact same sequence of, okay, first is finance, then is operations, then it's entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. I said, if I'm sitting at the table, I'm going to sit in a different chair every week.
Right.
I said, if you were to sit in a different chair every week, you watch and see how people smoke's coming out their ears, because they don't know how to relate, because you've changed the environment. You're still conducting the meeting. You're still getting the information out. But by just sitting in a different seat, you have changed the environment. And that is going to start making things unpredictable. You're consistent. We still meet Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock.
Right.
We still get the same information done. It's still conveyed, but it's conveyed in a different manner. People interacting with each other because they're sitting in a different seat. And you would be amazed at the dynamics, how they change, just because people are different in a room. In fact, Matt, I'll tell you this.
I'm gonna give you one more minute, David. Then I'd like to move it around. How did that improve? Some people listening, like me, might think, "Oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm thinking about those meetings I went to for 7 years, and I sat in the same chair.
That's
and,
right.
And that was kind of comfortable, you know, where now all of a sudden somebody's sitting in my chair. How would that help your meetings?
I'll tell you what, when I would do my seminars, go out and do like you do talks now, when I tell people to come back from break, you have to sit in a different seat, anywhere in the room, but you have to sit in a different seat. And I'll tell you what happens. At first, when they come back and they start, people are a little more quiet and reserved, but then suddenly the energy picks up because they're seeing things in a different way. I'm sitting next to a different person. I am literally at a different angle in the room. And you'd be surprised how that instigates just a change in people's participation.
That's great. That's great. That's good stuff, David. Thank you for sharing. I love these little nuggets that pop up, because those are things that we all, unless we're in the virtual world, like I'm thinking about moving you around on my screen right now. I've got the gallery view, so I'm going to start moving you around. Ray, you're going to go up to the upper right corner. Paul, you're going down to the left corner. Matt, I'm going to put you in the middle. Colin, I still haven't seen your face yet, Colin and Kaplan. I need to see your faces. So those are awesome things. Like, you know, your life is impacted by two things: the people you meet and the books you read. So right there, we all just learned something from David that we can apply right away. And I think heck, I'm thinking about dinner, you know, like you sit down at the same chair with your family when you eat dinner. Yeah. I mean, I did that, you know, growing up, 5 kids, mom and dad, yep. Same chair. That's dad's chair, right? That's dad's chair.
Yeah.
Boy, imagine if he sat in a different chair. That would have been disruptive. But it would have created conversation. And I think one thing you touch on, well, a couple things that spur thought. And I want you guys to, and girls, whoever's, men and women, I should say, be proper. You know, I want this to be interactive. This is a webcast. I want you have a thought, can add value to the conversation. Let's throw it out there. But you're impacted by two things: the people you meet and the books you read. And you just met David. That comment right there could impact your companies, your families. The books, I remember reading. I love audiobooks because obviously, if you're in your car, you know, it's hard for me to sit down for an hour at night to read, but I'm in the car probably a total of hour plus a day, and you can knock some things out. And I remember reading about how to organize a meeting. And in this book, it talked about asking the youngest person, the most junior person on your team for their opinion first. Because naturally we go around seniors to the most junior member. And so when it gets to that most junior member, they're probably not confident enough to counter something maybe David said. You know, let's say David's the lead vice president, and I go down the line and I'm going to pick on Dave Kaplan, who's on the call. David's younger. David's 33, and David might have the best idea because he might be closest to the customer. He might be closest to the generation that's using the technology. But if David was forceful and say, I think we should go left, and David thinks we should go right, he might not say it. But if I ask David first, David, what do you think we should do? And he says, I think we should go right, and gives me an opinion that validates his thoughts, I might be, wow. And that might open up everybody's eyes. So those are the little tricks to me that you want to learn and you could apply that could open up a lot of growth in your organizations.
Hey, Matt.
Yes,
Paul. This is Paul. Since we're on the topic of meetings and Myers-Briggs, one other tip I heard was that in a meeting, the extroverts, the E's, are going to steal the microphone and talk over other people. So as a leader, if you know who the introverts are, you may want to ask them a direct question. Ask them solicit their opinion directly. Hold off the other people and make sure that you hear from them.
That's a great question. Paul, share with everybody, where are you working? What do you do?
Sure. I am currently a fractional vice president of sales. So I work with 4 different companies right now, helping them get traction in startups and even existing businesses where they've fallen off the track. Spent 20 years in corporate America, ran my own company for 12 years, and it's fun having the variety and diversity of options.
Yeah. No, and you currently live in Denver?
In Denver,
North Carolina.
looking at Lake Norman.
Denver, and where did you go to school?
I am a Notre Dame grad. I was very unhappy to see Matt leave us after 1 year, but I understood.
Yeah, go Irish.
I've actually purchased Rebound for 10 different people, with the young people in my life, my son, 2 son-in-laws, and people that I coach. It's important for them to hear these stories, and your life is not going to be a straight upward incline. There's going to be little pigtails here and there.
Well, thank you, Paul. When I do some corporate talks, I put up a graph, and don't label the graph. And people introduce me sometimes. They say, Matt Doherty, former starter at North Carolina with Michael Jordan, head coach at Notre Dame, head coach at North Carolina, national coach of the year, head coach at FAU, head coach at SMU. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay, if you're listening, you're realizing there was some disruption there. So I come out with a graph, and it looks like, I'll say, what does that graph look like? And people say, market crash. I'm like, damn right it was a market crash. And the next, I put up that same graph and label it Matt's coaching career, and goes from Davidson College as an assistant to Kansas to Notre Dame to North Carolina to boom, drop. And dealing with failure. That's the beautiful thing about team sports. You deal with failure. I think sports and the military are 2 of the best places to learn leadership. And otherwise you have to seek it out. And I said this on last month's call, leadership is like golf. It's a skill that has to continually be developed. Because if you read a book or go to a seminar or get off this call and you say, well, I put in some time, I got a certification. I learned something. I'm a leader now. It's like, no. It's like the best golfers in the world go from the course to the range after a round to work with their swing coaches because they want to tweak it. And we always have to tweak it. I use the football analogy. You get into the red zone, you think you're ready to score as a leader. You think you've arrived. And then they push the button and extend the field another 100 yards. And I think especially now, this is the first time ever that there's 5 generations working under one roof. First time ever, 5 generations. And we, as I'm 59, I could say, screw them. It's my way or the highway. No. They have like 49% of the buying power and more influence because they're so active on social media. And people are having a hard time finding employees with the clients I work with. Well, you better adjust. You better adjust. As David said earlier, raising kids, coaching players, you treat everyone fairly, but not everyone the same. Go ahead, David.
Before we end, I just want to touch on one thing that you just alluded to, which I think is so critical, especially today. We're all familiar with the term mentors, that we mentor people to develop and everything else. And I have found that I really think it's important, as you just alluded to, Matt, we have all these different generations. I think we, leaders, and everything else, should be looking for our mentor, but our mentor should be someone who is 25, 29, 30 years old. What is it they are looking at? What is it they want to accomplish? We need them as a mentor. We shouldn't be the only ones disseminating information and wisdom and knowledge and skill in the building. We need to learn from them. I think the greatest leaders look for a mentor that's a generation or more younger than they are.
David, that's awesome, man. Thank you for joining this morning. 2 nuggets. I'm going to give you 2 gold stars. Okay, you got 2 gold stars. All right. Yeah, listen, we all love stars. Like Dean Smith, praise the actions you want repeated. So I want that input. So I want Ray, I want Colin, I want Dave, I want Matt to drop some nuggets. Don't be afraid to drop nuggets because Dave is the extrovert. So Paul, I'm going to pick on Ray here in a second and ask him for some input. I know Ray's an extrovert, but not like Dave. But
Perfect.
We had a speaker who was Catherine Jeffrey, great speaker at Vistage. We've had great speakers. She talked about the 5 generations under one roof. She talked exactly what you said, Dave. We need to mentor up. We always want to mentor down. She talked exactly what you said, that there should be young people in the organization that mentor up. And that kind of fits in with what I said earlier about in a staff meeting, asking the youngest or most junior person first for their input before I go. So I go in reverse order. I go up the line. So Ray is in the executive search business worldwide. So now we're talking about culturally. So as we're talking here, Ray, about knowing yourself and communication and leadership, and self-assessments in your industry, you're cutting edge, you're on the front line. What resonates with you? What nuggets can you drop here to us?
Thanks, Matt. I guess I look at this not at what we can do globally or what we do as an executive search, but David and Paul kind of hit the nail on the head. I've started 5 different companies, all have grown to be successful. And every time I find that if you give the younger people the opportunity to succeed by giving them your little nuggets, but also giving them more responsibility than they've ever expected in their life at that time. And you will find that certain people jump to the top. It's harder now, the millennial age, to find those people, but man, they're out there. I have a couple people on my staff that jumped in an opportunity that I never even presented to her. And you can watch how they can excel. But that's all part of, I guess, leadership self. I know I'm not good at a lot of things. I'm good at driving.
Ray, your wife told me that. Your wife and I sat for a long time, and she, quite frankly, I mean, there's a list. There's a list, Ray.
It's long. She knows that if there's a sales call, she knows to be quiet because she knows that now I'm in my element. But the rest of it, it's hard.
The rest of it.
But yeah, David, I listened to you. You know, that beginning part was just heads on. Finding people and not going after the mentor. I mean, I look at Matt, I look at David, I mean, SeaWorld, I'm like, that's crazy. Managing animals, that's got to be harder than anything in the world. But
well, I have 15 basketball players between the age of 18 and 22. Okay. I mean, you know, they didn't take orders like the killer whales David dealt with. But anyway, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah. But grab those young people that are in your organization. Like you said, shake them up a little bit, but give them the opportunity. Some of them are going to fail. And that's the best way to find out where they're going to be. You can't have them doing the same thing every day. I'm a very repetitive business. You know, we do global expansion, but it's really recruiting. We're new territories. I can sit somebody in a seat and teach them to be a recruiter. I can't teach them to be a manager or a sales person. I can teach them to do repetitive tasks, but you got to give them something new. Give them a challenge. Let's see how they come to the forefront. And you're going to find that people can jump, and there's going to be some failures, but we all assess them very quickly. I think we look them in the eyes, you hit the shaking the hand, how they react, what they want to do, what their family life is. I'm sorry, I look at all of that. How do you make them successful? And it keeps on moving. I've been blessed with some great people in the last year during this COVID, watching my global team come together with all these crazy Zoom calls, and how can we grow and how can we talk? Haven't met some of my new employees yet. It's a different world, but give them the opportunity to do something different and they jump on it.
Ray, that's awesome stuff. I'm not going to let you go away here. A couple questions. So, well, one thought, this whole podcast, this whole webcast, the book Rebound, From Pain to Passion, Leadership Lessons Learned, was all based off of failure.
Mhm.
And the neat thing about being a college basketball coach, you fail a lot and it's public. So you have to be held accountable. You can't hide from it. You got to embrace it. And you know, in my job now as an executive coach, one of my clients the other day said at 28, he didn't get a job. And the reasons why he didn't get it, because the guy hiring him, who was a friend, did some research and found out how he treated certain people in the warehouse. And I said, you know what? That's probably the best thing that ever happened to you. You know, at the time, you didn't think so. I didn't get my job. I wanted this job. I deserved this job. You didn't get it. And I think the key is the guy who didn't give him that opportunity told him why. And I talk about Stevitt, know yourself. And then the T in Stevitt is mind for the truth. I think sometimes we're afraid to give people feedback. You know, why did you fail? You failed because A, B, and C. And it doesn't have to be personal. And so many young people now, this is where the generational thing can be an issue. They haven't been coached before. They haven't been told that they're not good. They haven't been told, you know, they're bad at something. And so they don't handle that conflict, but then you can't grow. So we have to allow us, create a safe environment for failure. Celebrate failure. Hey, good job, man. You tried. Yeah, you didn't get it right, but now you know. Now you know. Now look at what you learned. And that's leadership, because again, you can read the book on leadership, but you're not going to be a good leader until you're standing in front of a group of people and you screw up. You screw up. The question I asked you, Ray, I've talked to people about, we had a speaker at Vistage, that resumes and interviews are low indicators of success in the job front. That assessments, and obviously as much information as you can get on past behavior. What do you do in a search firm with assessments and trying to find good intel on past behavior?
Yeah, I think we tried to come up, you know, the resume, the work history, it's all documented. You can go on LinkedIn, you can go Google it, you can find everybody's work history. Our assessment is trying to give a personality match, and we're not experts at it, but we do it with our clients. We meet our clients, we find out what Matt Doherty likes, and then trying to find if we can make that personality match. Some of the things in the States, and we have all different country laws that we deal with, but when we get to Europe, we can tell a lot of information. Marital status, you know, all these, you know, great things, their preferences, but that's what brings the assessment. That personal side of it. We just had a client, I was on a staff meeting and they were complaining, how do we know this person's going to succeed? You know, and it's a sales role in a new country. How do we know this person is going to succeed? What if he fails? Well, that's the thing that you have to take the risk on. We can bring you all the skills, the hard skills. It's those soft skills. I hate Myers-Briggs tests. I hate all these tests that all these companies do, because
They're not tests. They're not tests. They're assessments.
They're assessments. We watch them crash and burn, these great people, because, oh, this person's personality is here. Well, that's the test. Or the best answer that we get is they took the test to the test. They answered the test the way they wanted to. Those are things that are really hard. So the only thing we can do as a team is we teach our people to give your personal opinion of what you think they're going to be good at, what their strengths are. Yeah, they've been selling SaaS software. They've been built this organization in Europe. Yeah, they've done all these things, but can they do it? Do they fit into your profile? And it's been hard. We changed from multi-page assessments to one-page assessment. The resume tells a story, the LinkedIn page tells a story, and then we take it down to our personal opinion. And that's what seems to be selling for Reese Marks and my organization, something different. You got to do something
Yeah.
different all the time.
Well, thank you for adding. That's awesome, Ray. Chuck, you're in the HR business. You and I had lunch. We talked about assessments. All right. I'm going to ask you to, what are your thoughts on assessments in the hiring process, but not only the hiring process. I think that I talk about Stevitt, the 6 knows of leadership. First one is know yourself. You can't lead others if you don't know yourself. The second is know your team. And I think sometimes, even though you've been working with your team, do you really know them? And so I think there's value in using assessments with your current team if you didn't do it in the onboarding process, on the hiring process. Chuck, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think
And
that's
Chuck,
probably
give a background on what you do.
so. Just a high-level overview, Matt, and I appreciate the opportunity. My company is Whitewater Consulting. We do HR consulting work with small and mid-sized companies. What's really been fascinating, particularly over the last 18 months, we've seen such a major change when it comes to leadership and when it comes to the ability to be able to attract and retain our high-performing employees. And I think that a lot of this comes back to, and I continue to hear this today, and that is we can't get people, and we're losing people because of whatever reason, because they found another opportunity. And I don't know, from my perspective, I think that the challenge isn't that the employees are leaving the company because of one particular issue. If anything, it's the fact that we've got a leadership issue in a lot of small and mid-sized companies. The fact that we truly know who our employees are. And a lot of times we look at our employees and we see them as a line item on our financial statement, and we look at them as an expense. And the reality is they are our greatest asset when it comes to our small business, and we should be investing in them. We have to get to know them, as David said, we have to get to know them on a personal level so we can understand what motivates them, because we've for so long. And I've been guilty of this in companies I've run. I've tried to manage my entire team based on one set of parameters, and it didn't work. I tried to parent under one set of parameters, and it did not work. And the greatest lessons that I've learned over the last 10 years have actually come from my kids, getting to know them, getting to understand really what motivates them and what is important to them. And the relationships that have changed have been significant. And so I see that same type of situation being able to be applicable into our companies today.
Well, you just touched on a couple of things. Mentoring up. You learned from your kids. They mentored up, just like David was talking about earlier. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. David, you threw a punch at the screen when Chuck said something. What resonated with you?
Well, the point is when he was saying the fact that your company DNA is your employees. It's not you as a manager, what you dictate. It's what your team, your staff, your employees, your group, what their behavior, again, it's all about behavior. Their behavior represent what your company is. And what you want is, you want your staff, you want your individuals to develop, which means they're going to get better. The only way to get better is to do something different. I mean, that's just the rule of life. You can't be better at something unless you do it different. So if you're doing it different and everybody's doing things differently, there is a change. There's a natural change. There's a natural evolution. And so every 2 years or so, you need to identify what is it we are now consisting of versus what we were. And if we're going to get better now, we're doing what? What is it we're doing better? What is it we're not doing as well? As the personalities change, as the skills, the knowledge, and abilities grow and develop, your DNA, your brand equity is also evolving as well, which is what you want. And so a good manager is constantly evaluating and assessing. I, as a manager, as a leader, I am assessing what's changing and what I need to do accordingly to evolve in my management skills and my leadership skills to keep this moving forward. So it's a constant evaluation. It's not like, okay, I'm the boss. I've been the boss. I've been sitting in this boss desk for 20 years. And as you said so much earlier, my way or the highway. Hey, your way better be changing. Your way had better be changing. and it's going to change based upon the DNA of your company and the evolution and development of your staff, which is what you're trying to do. I find it interesting. I'm trying to teach my staff to be better, but yet I don't want to change the way I'm doing things. But I'm wanting you to change what you're doing, but I'm not going to change what I'm doing.
Right.
There's a disconnect there. Bingo, big time.
Right. That's awesome stuff. Yeah. Matt, you just
Unmuted
unmuted.
there.
You got something to add
Yeah.
here? What are your thoughts?
I-
Tell us who you are and,
Yeah, I do.
and where do you live and work?
Yeah, so I actually work with Ray with Reese Marks. I run our global sales team, actually Denver, North Carolina. Paul's probably right down the street from you at some point here. But really, just as I've been kind of sitting here and listening, everybody's sort of touching on the same thing, and it really resonates with what I feel like I'm trying to work on and grow as a leader, but also help my team with. And really, it's becoming comfortable with the unknown, right? Being comfortable with that sort of discomfort. And I think that's what we're talking, being comfortable with failure and how do we grow from that? I mean, I was an athlete growing up, played college football. And really, I think that's something that's always been in my DNA, is to sort of lean in when things get difficult. And I think a lot of times our employees, they shy away from that, right? They want to do what is comfortable. They want to do what's routine, what's predictable. So all these sorts of pieces to me are, how do we help our team become comfortable with the unknown, right? The past year and a half, I hate talking about COVID, but there's been so many unknowns, and it just has shown just a fear, and people freeze and they just kind of stood still. Our company, to tout us a little bit, we kept going forward, and we're a service business, right? We rely on our people to be productive, to work hard, to get things done. And they've done a great job of continuing to move forward and just saying, you know what, all this stuff is a little crazy out here, but what I can control is what I can control, and we're going to keep moving forward. And that's why I believe we've come out, stronger than we were beforehand. So just a lot of what everybody's talking about has really resonated in terms of how I've been trying to live and lead the team here. Just as something becomes, lack of comfort, we probably should go, full force into that. Not to continue to work on something that necessarily is something I'm not good at. But when something becomes uncomfortable, it's probably because something good will come out of that once we get through it.
Well, that's the only way to grow. I mean, you got to be uncomfortable, as David said. I used to teach players. I used to like to teach them how to shoot. I felt like you could impact someone's game immediately by improving their shooting. And, a player would have his elbow out, left, thumb the ball, do different things. And I'd say, okay, I want you to get the elbow under, ball over the right side. And Raymond Felton, who played in the NBA for a long time, doesn't feel comfortable. He said it doesn't feel comfortable. And he tried it. And I said, Tiger Woods in 1996 won the Masters going away and changed his swing because he knew it wouldn't hold up in other events. I said, if Tiger Woods could change his swing, you could get your elbow under the damn ball. Now, Raymond, and the worst thing that happened, he goes away for Christmas, comes back, and he's back here shooting like this. And he hits 5 out of 8 3-pointers against NC State at NC State. And I'm like, oh no, that just reinforced, bad habits. But then I got fired and he went back to working on it. And he was nice enough to give me some credit saying, hey, Coach Doherty tried to get me to do this a couple of years ago. And so developing new habits, and like you said, Matt, creating a safe place that it's okay to fail. Celebrate the failure. Hey, that was a hell of a job. You just screwed that thing up royally. Wow, good job. I mean, who does that, right? But that's really, we talk about good losses in sports. That was a good loss. What the hell's a good loss? Yeah, it's a good loss. Got your ass kicked. Now you know what you need to work on. It's all about the leader. It's your organizations only rise to the level of the leadership. And if it's incompetence, you get incompetent company. We've got 10 minutes. It's 8:50. I want to end on time. Chuck, you look eager to input.
I got two things I just want to mention, and I want to tie into what Matt Mann was just talking about as well. So from a personal life, I just want to give a little bit of a plug for you, really to you, Matt, for the work that you're doing right now. And when I go back to my over my career, my greatest failure I had was whenever I was in ownership of a company where we did not have, one, as I was extremely young, leadership that we had there was extremely aggressive, definite visionaries, but did not have anybody who was really good from a tactical standpoint. And so we made some really, really poor decisions as a leadership team with what we did with the resources that we had in the company. And so we ended up, at the end of the day, we ended up basically selling the company to get out from underneath the mistakes that we made. And when I look back over that time, one of the greatest things that I've learned from that is the real value of having a coach or having a mentor or having people in your life where they help hold you accountable. Because I firmly believe that if I would have had that in my life at that point, we would never have made the same mistakes that were made. That's first. Second, to Matt Mann's point about going through COVID, with the CEOs that I talked to over the last 18 months, it's been really interesting to see as we were going through March, April, May, June of last year. I talked to CEOs that were sitting in their office, and some of them were really committed to bringing their leadership team together. They were working with a Vistage coach or somebody, a peer advisory group. And those companies were actually able to move forward in a much quicker fashion, timeline-wise, as well as they were much more successful throughout the year of last year. On the flip side of that, I had several CEOs I talked to. They were sitting in their office at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, paralyzed. They did not know what they were going to do or how to even think about moving their company forward. And so for me, even as an HR consultant, it gave me the opportunity to kind of come alongside some of them and help coach them through that part of that process. But again, the value of having somebody like a Matt or somebody from a peer advisory group, having coaches in your life, regardless of age, I think is extremely important. And that's something that, again, I'm trying to really impress upon the younger generations is they've got to have those kind of people in their life on a personal side as well as on a professional side, just to serve as guardrails to help them not make those major mistakes.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much. We have 7 minutes. And I was immediately thinking about maybe topics for next month. And I may adjust the date to start earlier in the month to avoid Thanksgiving, Christmas, and a lot of the holidays that come at the end of the year. But failures. Let's talk about our failures. And again, I go back to the book Rebound, From Pain to Passion. I've got a podcast, the Rebound podcast, and I've talked to people. Ryan Leaf, number 2 quarterback behind Peyton Manning, ends up in jail 4 years later. A friend of mine, Michael Center, the tennis coach at Texas, gets put in jail, was involved in the academic scandal, the admission scandal in college athletics. Danny Manning got fired as the head coach at Wake Forest. John Beilein was fired as the head coach after having massive success at Michigan, gets fired at Cleveland. David Chadwick, who's a local pastor in Charlotte, who played at the University of North Carolina basketball, was the start of this church, was the pastor for 39 years, was forced to resign. So I think talking about failures and then coaching scars, the things that we have said and done that we cringe at now, like, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. When you hear other people, it gives you some confidence, because I think misery does like company, because we all feel like we got to be perfect. And I talk in the past about masks. We all wear these masks and they get heavy as hell. And one of the masks I like to wear is I've got my shit together mask. Okay. Well, I don't have my shit together. All right. News alert. And I'm putting that mask up on the hook because, I'm thinking about all the things, my schedule, COVID, my daughter's in New York, the crap that's going on in our country. I don't have my stuff together. I like to think I do. You walk in, you want to act like you got your shit together. I don't have my shit together. Okay. And the tough guy mask and this other mask, and you take those masks off and get real with each other. And a friend of mine, Brian Moran, who was on the talk last month, said vulnerability is the new invincibility. And I think by showing your vulnerability, people lean into that. They respect that more because they see all this perfect crap on social media and in the world that people have everything together. So when people show vulnerability, they realize, wow, I don't have to be perfect. He's not perfect. I thought he was perfect. He's not perfect. And so I think just sharing these experiences hopefully help each other. Anything, JD's in New York, I've been listening. Thank you very much, Dave. In Charlotte, Mogio, Robert in New York, right? Robert, you're in New York?
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you, we have 4 minutes before we close. Just some thoughts that resonate with you. You're the guy who's quiet in the background, but I know you've got a nugget you're getting ready to drop on us.
No, I wasn't getting ready to drop.
Put Paul's lessons to work, right? I'm coachable. You can teach an old dog new tricks. So Robert's the quiet one. I'm asking him a direct question, right, Paul? So Robert, drop some knowledge on us. You got 3 minutes.
Okay. No, your book, what I really liked about your book, it really resonated with me. And it's not because I know your brother John very well. I went to high school with him because I had my own failures. I mean, I fell flat on my face. My boss died of cancer 7 years ago. And, I do the same exact thing your brother does. But 75% of my book of business was wiped out within 5 months because, and I kept telling my bosses who took over the company, like, hey, we got a problem here. We got a problem here with this guy. And he ended up stealing $3 million worth of our business. And so here I am. I fell flat on my face. And I was like, wow. I mean, here's, Matt Doherty. I was like, there were a couple of things about the book that was like, wow. And I know you were offered a job at St. John's, and then, Lou Carnesecca quashed that. And I was just like, wow. I mean, here's a guy who did a great job at Notre Dame. You played with one of the greatest basketball players ever at North Carolina, and then boom, you fall flat on your face again. So
yeah.
And now I'm trying to.
So what did you learn, Robert, from that? And again, we have 2 minutes. What did you learn from that experience? And you're in the financial industry. You're private wealth management. Right?
Right.
So what did you learn from that experience of falling on your face and the person dying and $3 million stolen? What did you learn from that experience?
Well, I don't know. I spoke up and, people didn't believe me. And, the stuff, I guess, the stuff that I had learned from my father, unfortunately, my father passed away 34 years ago of cancer. And, my father did counterintelligence in the CIA when he was drafted for Korea. He didn't have to fight over in Korea. And because he took a psychological profile exam, and the U.S. Army said, listen, out of 300 people.
Assessment. Hey, Ray, he took an assessment.
Yeah. My father did a psychological profile exam. And they said, out of 300 people, you're one of 2 people who passed the psychological profile exam. And they said, here's your choice. You go fight over in Korea, or you do counterintelligence with the CIA. And he was taught, my father was a psychotherapist for over 25 years, but he was taught stuff that he taught me about, watching people's behavior and stuff like that.
Right.
And I pick up on stuff right away from people, and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's not all, you know. And
Right.
people will look at you and say, you're nuts, you're out of your mind.
Right.
And then a year, 2 years later, boom, you know, the whole thing collapses, and then they look at you and like, yeah, you were right.
Right. Well, that's, I want to start this on time and end it on time, because I
Yep.
don't want people, I want you coming back. I want you coming back for more.
Oh, I'll
So
definitely come back.
I appreciate the comment. And I think the thing that we learn sometimes is trust our instincts, have confidence in ourselves, and we can be mentors for other people to give them confidence, because I don't care how old you are. I'm 59. I still want confidence. I still need, hey, good job. Or, you know, we all need encouragers in our lives. So thank you so much for being a part of this. Stay tuned. We're going to do this on a monthly basis. I hope you all learned something today, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All
Matt.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.